Look, I'm not going to pretend to lie to you guys right now and act like I truly know what was going on with Harley Reid and the West Coast Eagles against the Gold Coast Suns. I mean, it was a terrible display. The Suns absolutely smacked them up really, really bad. And I mean, it wasn't a good look for a lot of different reasons. Not only were the Eagles getting pumped by over 100 points, but you had their best young player and hopeful future, maybe even Brownlow medalist, Harley Reid, who just didn't look like he was in the game at all. And it seemed like he was trying to start fights more than actually play football in the game. Again, this has led to a lot of rumors and conspiracies around, a lot of talk actually on radio, where there's been a couple mentions that a couple of the reasons why Harley Reid might be, again, a little bit distracted is that he actually might have already checked out and potentially has already made his mind up that he wants to be a Victorian AFL player. Now, look, this to me is pretty surprising, especially with the season that we had seen Harley Reid have last year. And it's also very surprising that a lot of experts and commentary is already saying this about Harley Reid after only one game. Again, the fact is this guy's a 19-year-old and there could be a lot of reasons why he just had a bad game and just had a bad day. I don't think it means he's necessarily freaking checked out of the West Coast Eagles and has made his mind up that he's going to Victoria. After all, I have been pretty confident in saying that I think Harley Reid will stay with the West Coast Eagles and, continue to play for them long term. But it doesn't mean that there hasn't been any talk by experts and commentary out there, to the point where reliable insider Cameron Hicks, who again is a Richmond Football Club insider, I'm sure you guys have seen me talk about him before, he has more often than not been right about things. For example, a month or two, I think it was, before the draft, he actually said that the Tigers were going to do everything in their power to get Sam Lawler and Jonty Fall from the greater Western Victoria Rebels. And as we know, the Tigers would go on to take Sam Lawler at pick 1, and I believe Jonty Fall was taken at pick 14. So he's a very, very credible insider that has gotten a ton of things right. And he actually wrote a little thing saying that Harley Reid will increasingly build momentum to leave West Coast by 2026. With expectation, there's a chance he could request out this offseason. Hawthorn, Richmond, and Essendon will lead the pack if Harley Reid requests a trade this offseason. West Coast will demand a major package if he were to depart this offseason. Richmond will be willing to wait until the end of his contract. Watch this space heavily. Now, look, I don't necessarily know if Hawthorn are as likely as the other two teams, or at least I didn't think they were a couple weeks ago, but after a couple things that we have seen, and I'm not going to use him at Tom Barrass's wedding sitting next to Sam Mitchell as reference. I think that's pretty ridiculous and an overblown story. But if we're going to talk about, again, Hawthorn actually getting hold of Carlton's first round pick, and the fact is that, again, we don't know how Carlton are going to go with Charlie Curnow throughout the season, but what we saw without Charlie Curnow was a massive disaster. Again, if Carlton don't make the 8, what I'm trying to say is that pick could actually shape up to look a lot better than what we originally thought it was going to be. Again, that's a lot of ifs and buts. Carlton still might do something pretty good in 2024, but again, or 2025, sorry. It's very, very early to look on the Hawks. But if we look at the Bombers and the Tigers, I mean, well, yeah, the Tigers are literally not paying anyone. They have all the picks in the world, all the young players in the world. I think they would probably be the favourites right now for him. And of course, Essendon, as we know, they did just stockpile 2 first-round picks, and they, are legitimately doing something really good, I think, with some of the young players they've drafted. And I think eventually as well, they're going to build through this draft, because after all, I didn't think they looked that bad against Hawthorn, and I think there's a young foundation here that if you were to add a guy like Harley Reid, it could be insanely good. Again, I want to preface before I give any more thoughts and opinions off about the Richmond Tigers here, but I still do think personally that Harley Reid will re-sign. So if you're a West Coast Eagles fan, please don't come in the comments down below and threaten my whole entire family tree. I genuinely think he probably will re-sign. And just from the people that I know who have personally lived in Perth, I know that they absolutely love it. Again, Jai Cully, who I've spoken to numerous of times, he absolutely loved his time in Perth and loved his time with the West Coast Eagles. So I don't know about Harley Reid leaving the Eagles. I don't think it will happen. But I think Richmond will be a team where you've got to watch this space closely, because they are just quietly building one of the best young cores in the AFL. Again, what we saw from Sam Lawler, Luke Traynor, and Harry Armstrong in the first game against Carlton, 3 guys debuting, was disgustingly good. They were disgustingly, insanely good, especially Lawler and Traynor, who just honestly didn't really do anything wrong at all. And Lawler, I think, was ranked like the 3rd or 4th best player on the ground. Again, absolutely insane behavior from 3 draftees there. And that's not even to mention that Richmond drafted 5 other guys in that draft, 4 of which were basically first-round picks, as well as players like Josh Gibcus to come back from his ACL injuries, and an abundance of young players who all of a sudden look like they're switching on and coming good, with, of course, James Trezise, who had a fantastic game, Sam Banks, who was a former first-round pick from 2021, having an absolutely good game against Carlton. A bunch of those players, Richmond just look like their young core it's phenomenal. And the fact is the AFL, aka North Melbourne, let this team, who has built one of the best young cores in the game and probably will be the best young core very shortly, North Melbourne gave them their first round pick. And I know the season's very early, but North don't look like they're going to be finishing past 15th or 14th. Again, it's very, very early. I could be very wrong. After like round 8 or before round 8 last year, we all thought Hawthorn were going to like finish last, and they ended up making the 8. So it is very early, but just from what we've seen, Richmond have their first round pick, which should probably still be a top 5 pick, and North. So they could very well have like pick 3 and 5, pick 2 and 5 even, come draft night. Again, I think the issue with going with Harley Reid is that if you were to trade for Harley Reid, especially this year, where he is contracted still, and again, if he does want to return home for some reason, there is no way you are going to be able to do this trade without throwing in picks, let's just say 2 and 5. The 2 presumably top 5 picks that Richmond are going to have this year. And in my opinion, that is a massive risk. Again, we've seen what Harley Reid can do. He has had a phenomenal first year, but that hasn't taken away from the fact that he has still come into the season, again, a tiny bit overweight, a tiny bit unfit, and just had a really, really bad first game. Again, I still think this guy's going to be a future star and quite possibly the best player in the league one day. But considering the 2025 draft doesn't really have much depth in it, other than it's like top 6 picks being apparently some of the best top 6 players we've seen in a minute, you're almost like, as Richmond, you're like, crap, we could go out and get Harley Reid, who may be the best player one day, right? We could do this in 2025, or we could compose ourselves real quick, take those picks to the draft, select, the 2 best players, or like pick 2 and 5 or whatever, and call it a day and wait for Harley Reid next year. And that's what I think they should do, because if Richmond have, let's just say, 2 and 5 this year, West Coast are going to absolutely want that, and they're going to demand that, right? And with how you're building, you don't want to rush into this rebuild too early. I think you should take those 2 players and call it a day. But once you've got those 2 guys and you just realize, holy crap, our draft and our young core is absolutely insane, then it comes to 2026 and you're like, well, we've got pick 5 here. We want Harley Reid. West Coast can obviously match his deal. Let's give West Coast pick 5 and maybe a future first round pick for Harley Reid. Again, if you do that, you get to have the 2 first round picks that, of course, wouldn't have in 2025 if you do that deal then. And you get to get Harley Reid the year later, which just makes so much more sense for the timeline of the rebuild, if you guys know what I mean. Again, you don't want to have a massive draft in 2024, then have no draft in 2025 because you've just gotten Harley Reid, and then have a massive draft in maybe 2026. Again, I think personally, if it was me, you would rather have a massive draft in 2024, a back-to-back massive draft in 2025, just so all those young guys get to develop at like the same age, and then worry about Harley Reid in 2026, especially considering in 2026 then he would be out of contract, right? He would be out of contract by then. The thing is, again, in 2025, he's not out of contract. He is still a contracted player, and because of that, you're going to have to even give more. So, yeah, it is very tough. Again, is pick 2 and 5 worth Harley Reid? Probably. He could very well be the best player in the game one day. But I think if you're Richmond, you should back yourself in and go to the draft this year and take those guys, and then look at Harley Reid when he's a free agent, and just do it even respecting West Coast as a team. Again, if Essendon want to go out and overpay Harley Reid a massive, massive contract to try and outbid Richmond and offer even more picks to try and outbid Richmond, if you're the Tigers, you should just let them do that. And again, I think that would be the worry as an Essendon fan, is you would be worried that your team is just going to try and outbid a team like Richmond because they're desperate. I mean, Essendon, they know their fans want a finals win. They desperately know they want a finals win. And you don't want to be the team that's like, oh, Richmond are offering this guy $2 million a year. We're going to offer him 2.3 million a year. Richmond are offering you guys 2 first-round picks. We'll give you 3 first-round picks. You don't want to be that team, and I fear that's who Essendon could be. And I think on the Hawthorn side of things, I don't know if Hawthorn would have enough to offer West Coast for Harley Reid, especially this year when he's contracted. So if he wants to go to Hawthorn, I can't see that happening. I think it's only Richmond or Essendon. And I think if you're an Essendon fan, you just tiny bit worry about them trying to outbid Richmond, because Richmond are in a situation where they would love Harley Reid, but they don't need to destroy the future of their drafts to go out and get Harley Reid. Essendon, they're probably willing to do that, which is kind of scary, but also it could be the reason they've set themselves up for such a big 2025 AFL draft. So this will be something very much to continue to look at, continue to look forward to, and watch this space on how Harley Reid is going to go. Will the Richmond Football Club be offering him a massive deal, or will they, out of respect for West Coast, maybe wait a year and respect to the draft that they've built themselves this year? Again, how are they going to go about that? And the same with Essendon. How are they going to go? Are they going to try and overpay and outbid Richmond? Hawthorn, where do they sit in this? There's a lot of ifs and buts, a lot of questions that I would love to hear from you guys down below. Do you guys think Richmond should go for him? Should Essendon go for him? Will they overpay him to outbid Richmond? I'd very much like to know all of your thoughts and opinions on this down below. And even if you're a Hawks fan, how do they go about this with Harley Reid? Do they even try and get him? Because, God, he would be even good with Hawthorn. It'd be such an amazing sight for Hawks fans. So let me know all of your thoughts and opinions on this down below. No matter who you go for, who do you think should go for Harley Reid, or should he just re-sign with West Coast and be loyal to the team that drafted him? Again, I'd very much like to know. Subscribe to the sports channel for all those AFL content news. My gaming channels, which will be linked in the description down below, and so will my IRL/vlogging channel. Yeah, as I was saying, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.